bells in the 7 towers tolled for Robert Baratheon as color fell through crystal and turned dust motes into slow-drifting banners. The great September of Baelor smelled of beeswax and incense. Its marble floor shone with the gloss of tears and long, tired prayers. The aisles were a river of black and gold and red. Courtiers and captains, ladies veiled like mourners and ladies veiled like spies, while beneath the mother's serene stone gaze lay the king's bier, draped in cloth embroidered with stags and crowns and all the past tense of power. Eddard Stark stood in the shadow of the father's statue and felt the old vow in his bones, that plain thing that did not change, to keep his word. The wound in his leg throbbed like a second heartbeat. The crutch bit his palm. He had slept little and not at all without dreaming, and in every dream there had been a bed of blood and a girl's hand clutching his, fervent even as it cooled, and a whisper that had not faded in all the years between the southern sun and northern snow. "Promise me, Ned." He could feel the press of eyes before he saw the faces. Cersei Lannister glittered in morning silks the color of midnight wine, a diadem on her hair. Beside her, Joffrey stared at Robert's shrouded form with that restless disdain of boys who know the world belongs to them because no one has yet dared to teach them otherwise. Ser Barristan Selmy stood as if carved out of oath and white steel, the Kingsguard's white cloaks falling straight as a judge's sentence. Pycelle hovered like a cobweb in the corner of a window. Near the back, Varys smiled with perfect mildness. Peter Baelish's mouth curved as if he had thought of a jest and set it aside. Among the small folk packed in the nave there were faces like weathered wood, faces like bread gone stale, faces like the sea waiting for storms. The High Septon's voice drooped from the high pulpit, the cadence of a man whose words had outlived his belief in them. And may the smith set his shoulder to the wheel and lift the load from his soul. Eddard Stark stepped forward before his courage could be mistaken for patience. He leaned on the crutch, set his feet beneath him as if they were planting stones in a river so that those coming after might cross. "My lords," he said, and the quiet shifted. "Your grace." He inclined his head toward the boy who would be king. "High Septon." Cersei's hand tightened on the arm of her seat. The music of her rings, gold on wood, was beautiful and cold. "Lord Stark," she said, "this is a time for prayer." "And truth," Eddard said. The word carried. It moved through colored light and the stillness beneath statues, and he felt that the stone listened. "For the peace of the realm, truth is owed." Joffrey's lip curled. "Has the wolf come to whine for mercy? We mourn my father. It is not the hour for your northern slowness." "Your father," Eddard tasted iron. He could feel the old anger wanting to be young again, to be wild and simple as it had been when he had ridden south with Robert and young men believed war was clean. "The realm mourns Robert Baratheon. I mourn the friend who came to my hall with summer on his shoulders and laughter like thunder." Cersei stood. The movement was small and vast. "We do not require your elegies, but the realm requires my witness," Eddard said, and his voice did not waver. "In the sight of the seven and the faces of gods I honor in my own house, I speak what is true. A lie has burdened a good name. For years I carried it to keep a promise. Now I break my silence to keep it better." A murmur, like wind finding a crack in a shutter, moved the length of the nave. Sansa's face, pale and perfect and terrified, lifted toward him from the place where she stood among the ladies of the court, and he could not afford to see his daughter's eyes. Arya would be shadow somewhere. He had told her to keep to Septa Mordain, and Arya had always obeyed exactly the way a hawk obeys a bell, feeling in her bones which call to heed. He prayed she was on the move, where he could not recognize her and therefore not falter. Peter's mouth tilted, a private pleasure. Varys's hands folded like laces in velvet. Barristan did not blink. Eddard raised his left hand. The ring he wore was plain winter steel. He had never liked bitings of gold. Here, before the mother who knows the weight of love and the father who judges oaths, I say this: Jon Snow is not my son. The murmur became a sound. Some gasped for the taste of scandal. Some gasped for the reprieve from it. Sansa went whiter still. He heard Cersei's breath catch and knew he had struck her in a place she had not armored. She had expected him to claw at the Lannisters' gilded walls, not to tear open his own chest and let the court look in. Peter's glance flicked to Varys and back. Littlefinger measured ruin like a moneylender. Varys measured it like a surgeon. Bastards and whoresons breed like vines, Joffrey said with kingling contempt. Shall we tally them all today, Lord Stark? Not my son, Eddard said again. My blood? A man can bleed for another. My care? A man can raise what he did not beget. But my seed? No, Jon is not mine. Cersei's smile sharpened. At last a confession, she purred. The hand confesses his falsehood before gods and men. My lords, hear it. He declares himself a liar. No, Eddard said. It did not matter if she thought it victory. In a moment she would know its shape. I kept a child's life in silence because a dying girl asked it of me. I named him Snow to hide him in plain sight, where my honor would be mistaken for shame. I did it for love, her love. He saw Barristan's jaw tighten. He heard, as if from far away, the bells continuing their slow sorrow. He thought they sounded like winter horses. The old words were ready in him and came as if they had waited behind his teeth all these years. My sister Lyanna Stark went to her grave in a tower in the south. She died of fever and blood. I found her there. I was with her at the end. His throat closed and he made it open, as one makes a frozen gate yield. She had a son. She made me promise to keep him safe. I brought the boy home and called him mine, because I would damn my own name 10 times before I let hers be dirt to tread on. That boy is Jon. Silence fell like snow between hills. Varys's eyes, that had been the cool of still pools, and Peter's that had been coins in shade, both watched him with new attention. This piece of truth made the world tilt. Cersei's voice sharpened with satisfaction. A northern bastard, then. Much ado for a woodsman's misstep. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen was not a woodsman, Eddard said, and now there was no going back. The words left him and were instruments themselves, bronze trumpets calling banners out of fog. He took Lyanna Stark to wife beneath a Septon's blessing. She bore him a son, trueborn. Cersei laughed once, bright and brittle, cut and then it rang hollow. Septon's tales. Howland Reed of Greywater Watch stands ready to swear it, Eddard said. He was there with me when I found her. He knows what she asked. He knows what I promised. The midwife who placed the boy in my arms, Willa, lived then in the Dornish marches. I have her mark on this parchment. He touched the inside of his doublet and produced a folded letter sealed with plain wax. He had pressed his own wolf's head into it because there had to be some face governing this. And there is more, not rumor, not a song. A record kept by a devout scribe in the south. A marriage entered with the names of bride and groom, witness and day. I have a copy. The original lies in a vault where the 7 know how to find it if this one burns. You bring paper to a throne room of steel, Cersei said. Fury darkened the garnet of her mouth. Beside her, Joffrey stared as if Eddard's words had run to a language he had never learned. And this phantom scribe, I will name him for the High Septon in private if he swears me the mother's discretion until he verifies the seal himself, Eddard said. I will not make him a corpse with my tongue. The High Septon plucked at the fringe of his vestments. His eyes were small within folds of reverence. They were not unkind. Lord Stark speaks of grave matters, he said. Treacherous if false, weighty if true, blasphemous, Pycelle puffed. To accuse. I accuse no one, Eddard said, and it felt odd to say, for what he would say next was accusation in every other way. I reveal only the child's mother and father. The rest is the realm's arithmetic. He looked to Barristan. Sire, you rode with Prince Rhaegar. You knew him as a man. I did, Barristan said. His voice was the line of a blade. He loved his children. He esteemed honor. Then you will not say he stole, ravished, or defiled? Eddard asked. A Septon's blessing binds. My sister was not the spoils of war. She was his wife. The hall had become a drum hollowing itself for the first strike. Somewhere, Sansa sobbed once and pressed her knuckles to her lips as if to hold the sound in. The small folk, who had last seen a Targaryen on the throne when some of them were children being jerked along by older hands at feasts nobody held anymore, stared from face to face and tried to remember if dragons had ever been kind. Cersei's composure cracked at last. "You would make the realm bow to dragonspawn again," she said, and the hatred in her voice was old, older than her crown and older than every wrong done to her. It belonged to a girl who had learned early that she could never have what her brother was born to. "You plant treason in the great September like nettles on a grave." "I do not ask the realm to bow to anyone," Eddard said. "I ask it to know. The boy is sworn to the Night's Watch. He can claim nothing. He will claim nothing while he wears black." He looked at the boy on the throne. It hurt more than he had known to look at a child and know a man's wars would feed on him. But no lie should be a crown. Joffrey's face had gone stubborn with that small, dangerous thing he was. "Seize him," he said, and he did not shout. He made it an instruction, a king's word. Janos Slynt, with his mustache and his flexible spine, was halfway into motion before the sound of the order died. "No blade in the house of the gods," the High Septon said with more strength than his earlier prayers. He lifted his staff and acolytes took one step, not toward Slynt but toward the doors, toward the bells. "No man of the city watch will blood his sword beneath these windows. We keep the old courtesies still." For a heartbeat all of King's Landing balanced on a staff and a sentence. Peter's glance slid to Janos like a coin sliding under a sleeve. Varys breathed evenly. Barristan did not move. Cersei was quick. She always was. "Then let Lord Stark remain under the mother's eye until we have considered what to do with a man who lays dragon's eggs in the hearts of beggars." She smiled as one shows a stray dog her teeth. "Leave him to us, High Septon. We will not profane your stones. We will fetch him when prayers are done." "The God's will is not a leash," the High Septon said, and at last his voice carried not only sound but something like spine. "He shall remain in sanctuary until the faith examines his claims." "This is not a sept," Joffrey said, angry and young. "It is my city. It is my throne." Barristan's hand tightened, not quite closing on his sword hilt. "The city belongs to its people," he said softly, almost to himself, the way an old knight names each bone as it aches in the morning. Eddard felt the tremor in the air that comes in a forest before a gust, in a hall before a brawl, at a wedding before bloody boots. Could break. It might not. He bowed his head to the High Septon. "I will stand here," he said. He turned that sober, winter face to Cersei. "Send to Dragonstone. Send to Storm's End. Send to Old Town if you like. Let the realm be witness. I do not fear the light." Cersei's eyes promised that he should have feared darkness. She turned in a whisper of silk, took her boy by the elbow, and drew him like a sword from its scabbard, out through the flanking of gold cloaks and the murmurs that bent after her like grass. The bells tolled on, and the great September breathed slow as a great, sleeping beast. Eddard felt the ache ease in him a little. He had done it. The promise lay no longer only in him. A small figure detached from a pillar's shadow and drifted like smoke to his side. Arya's hair had strayed from its braids. Perspiration stuck curls to her brow. She stood just inside the sanctified boundary as if trusting gods for the first time in days. "Is it true?" she asked, voice small and not small at once. He did not tell her not to be here. The world had grown too sharp for such small false orders. "Yes," he said. She looked at him with quick eyes that saw edges men missed. "Then Jon is... What does that make him?" "It makes him Jon," Eddard said, "as he has always been." Her mouth made a tight smile that borrowed from her mother's and gave it back better. "Good," Arya said, and ran before he could say more, because the bells were ringing and Yoren of the Night's Watch had appeared in the back of the hall with straw in his hair as if it had grown there, and he caught her by the sleeve as if he had come exactly in time to catch that sleeve and not one heartbeat later. Sanctuary held. It held for a day and a night and another day, while the palace spat orders and the gold cloaks oiled their scabbards and the small folk carried gossip like injurious bread, nourishing and wounding at once. Eddard slept on a bench under the stranger's faceless mercy and woke to stiffness and the sound of footsteps that asked permission of no stone. Howland Reed came at last in loris leaves and leather, eyes the color of swamp water that had learned patience. He bowed to the High Septon and then to Eddard. "I would have come faster," he said, "if the river would bend when I tell it to." "You came," Eddard said. He put his hand on the man's shoulder and did not try to keep it from trembling. "That is enough." They spoke in a side chapel where the glass made the world a soft green and the smell was like growing things. Howland's mouth held its small smile, the one that belonged more to weirwoods than to people. "You mean to tell them all of it?" "Not all," Eddard said. "Enough." He brought out the parchment again, showed Howland the mark at the bottom. 3 quick little lines that might have been rays off a star or scratches from a quill that had slipped and could not be bothered to apologize. Willa's hand. She was frightened, but she signed. "I sent a man with coin and honor to bring this back from the marches." "And the copy, the scribe's entry." "Yes," Howland said, and his voice softened in a way that made Eddard remember new grass under bare feet as a boy. "I remember the prayers. There were always prayers in that place. There were more visitors." Varys came with his perfume and his careful hands and his eyes that watched other men's souls as if they were tapestries to be mended. "You have set a fire," Varys said, voice mild. "The smoke will be seen even across the narrow sea." "Let them look," Eddard said. "Some will look and see dragons," Varys murmured. "Some will look and see a candle lighting a house at night." He folded his hands. "Ser Barristan has been summoned to the throne room. There is talk that your queen," he made the possessive amuse itself, "means to retire him." Eddard's mouth went hard. "He is no man's ornament." "No," Varys said. "He is the last of a certain kind of oath, and the queen is fond of newer fashions." He studied Eddard. "Shall I tell you news hard to know? It might make your mercy cruel." "I have had my fill," Eddard said. But when Varys was gone, the words stayed like a thorn under a nail. There was always more. Court is a net. Some of what it catches is fish. Some of it is only the glint of water. That afternoon, the bells were still when a clamor carried from the direction of the Red Keep. Shouted orders, the hiss of quickly let breath, the ooh of a crowd finding itself at the edge of something it would later call story. The small folk spilled through the square with words like thrown stones. "Cast him aside," they said. "Old as ash." They made him remove his sword. And then he threw it. When night slicked the streets and made the city smells rise like ghosts, Barristan Selmy came to the Great September with his white cloak over his arm and his sword in his hand. Not bared, but the scabbard's mouth had been unkissed and that small indecency looked like truth. He knelt in the aisle where anyone might kneel, and he looked up at Eddard without shame and without plea. "I am no knight to a boy who calls himself king to obey his mother," Barristan said. "Not anymore. I have kept my vows as long as I could keep them without making them treason to themselves." The boy dismissed me. The queen smiled. "I am free to choose." Eddard felt the complicated sadness of men who have been let go from themselves. "And you come to me," he said. "I come to the realm," Barristan said simply. "You have brought it a truth I could feel in my old bones and would not name because I am a coward." He shook his head at Eddard's protest before it could be born. "Do not throw me a courtesy as if it were a cloak. I fear dishonor as other men fear death. That fear makes me slow, but I have eyes. I remember Rhaegar's face when he spoke the names of wife and child." He lowered his voice, not because there were ears but because the words had weight. "What do you intend, Lord Stark?" "To send for Stannis," Eddard said. "To lend the North's voice to the law. To barter for my daughter's safety and replace your gold-faced lions with men who remember that duty is not the same thing as obedience." He looked at Howland Reed, whose silence was the strength of certain reeds that do not break in storms. "To keep the boy I brought home safe in black. A safer black than most," Barristan said, and Eddard caught in the old knight's eyes the quick reflection of a lantern approaching. Yoren and his straw, threading the aisles with the lack of grace of honest men. "I can take a mouse out of a lion's mouth," Yoren said without preface. "Not a whole cow, mind, but a mouse." He scratched at his beard as if searching for fleas or courage. I got a girl that bites like one. I'll take her out the postern at dawn with the lads what are off north for the wall. Might be 1 or 2 more mice scurry out if you're quick. Take her, Eddard said, and for a moment the wall he had built in himself buckled. Take my daughter and keep her safe. I mean to, Yoren said, because certain men do not promise. They deliver. Meanwhile, crows flew. They flew north and east. One went to Dragonstone where wind wrote its own legends around black stone. And Stannis Baratheon read the letter Eddard had sent with his mouth going thinner than mouths ought to go. Davos Seaworth stood beside him, hands clasped before him like a man before a better man's altar. A red woman stood on the periphery with her smile like a cut that did not bleed. Stannis's voice had always been a rasp. It was greater stone now. If it is so, then the boy on the throne is a bastard. Davos shifted and did not scratch at the itch he felt. Sire, the Lord Stark says the boy in black is trueborn of Rhaegar and Lady Lyanna. But he's sworn to the wall. That's the long and short of the knot. The law is a blade dull men call complicated, Stannis said, and he looked at the red woman with suspicion that never left his eyes when it came to gods. Joffrey is no true king whether or not there is a DRA. Gon's whelp in black. The throne falls to me. The throne belongs to the rightful, the red woman said, her voice as smooth as oil set on wave. I have seen a boy with a wolf's eyes and a sword of no light, only darkness that drinks it. I have seen a stag kneel in his shadow. I have seen snow that did not melt on fire. Stannis's mouth half moved. You and your fires. Fire shows, Melisandre murmured. Men choose what to make of it. My choice is law, Stannis said. He folded the parchment as if it were armor and not paper. We write letters to the realm. We call bannermen. Davos, I'll have you take a ship with copies to Storm's End, to Oldtown, to any lord with eyes. We don't shout, we state. The realm should grow used to that from me. He made a sound that might have been a laugh if he had been a different man. And send a raven to the wall. I'll judge with gratitude a man who keeps his vows even when a throne is dangled before him like a worm for a fish. Davos bowed. As he left, Melisandre's eyes followed him like heat. There is king's blood in the north, she said softly to Stannis. It makes fires burn higher. Sometimes such blood must be bled. I'll not spill a man's life because you like the color, Stannis said, and the brief flare of temper made him almost beautiful. In the Vale, where gulls wrote white on blue and Lisa Arryn's nerves sang for their own sake, Catelyn Stark learned of Eddard's proclamation and sat down as if her legs belonged to another woman. She stared out the Ares window and did not see mountains. Her hands had a memory of a boy she had told herself was the sour in her sweet, and the shame of it rose like winter water behind a dam she had trusted. He is not his, she said aloud to no one, and because she was honest in ways that did not please her, she added, I knew on some day when my malice did not get to the end of its breath. She closed her eyes. The red anger at her husband, dead in memory for imagined unfaithfulness, fell like leaves and left a lattice of branches. Under that scaffold stood the shape of her own coldness. She had never asked Jon to forgive her. She had never asked him anything. 7 forgive me, she whispered, and did not know if they did. Her sister, eyes darting as if words might stab, pressed a hand to her sleeve and then away. It changes nothing, Lisa said too quickly. It changes everything. Oh, Catelyn, a Targaryen. She looked around as if to make sure there were no dragon scales in the room. The boy wears black, but men will unbutton that as easily as a bodice. You must go from here. You must take your boy and go to your wolves. The Lannisters chew. I have Tyrion in my keeping, Catelyn said with weary clarity. That is a feast for their teeth. Lisa flinched. Release him, then. Send him away. I want no lions at my door. I want no one at my door. Catelyn stood. I will do what keeps my daughters alive, she said. I will do what keeps my sons whole. If that means setting a lion loose, then I will cut loose his chain and let him run toward the hunters who want him more. She felt older and younger in the same breath. Some truths make you both. On the Trident's far bank, Tywin Lannister received the same letters that had roused Davos's sails and Stannis's will. He read in a tent where light fell on his face as if it had been ordered to do so. His mouth did not move. When it did, he said, "The North is a country of stones that think they are men. They will like a Targaryen's whelp less than I do." "Rhaegar's son," Jaime said idly from his stool, where he sharpened a dagger out of boredom. The sound had become the camp's cricket song. Wasn't the first one named Aegon? Or was that the second? He liked to do things twice. Tywin did not look up. The boy in black is no danger while he wears it. Law can be useful when one remembers to use it. Law, Jaime mused. "You'll let Stannis preach you out of your seat? Stannis will think he is uprooting us," Tywin said. "Let him. While he is digging, we will prune." He looked at the map, touched it where the river ran. "Joffrey should marry soon. Make a bond that irons doubt thin. The Tyrell girl likes crowns. Marjorie, she will be the illusion of summer they need." He glanced at the dagger. "Put that away. You don't need to look more like a sellsword than you already do. You wear a lion's skin as if it were a conscience," Jaime said, but he sheathed the blade. At the wall, where the world went to sharpen its edge against itself, Jon Snow fed ghosts strips of lean meat and tried to make sense of a raven's indifferent ink. Sam sat nearby with his mouth open and his heart out on his sleeve as always, as if hoping someone would take it and put it somewhere kinder. "What does it mean?" Sam asked. "It means I lied to myself every day in a way that helped me keep walking," Jon said. "It means I have a father I thought I had and do not, and another I never imagined and do. It means a woman I never met died to make me a secret. It means I am the son of a prince and the sister of the man I called brother." He laughed a short, bitter, disbelieving laugh that he had not earned the right to make. "It means nothing that helps me keep the cold off for another night." "It means you have two names," Sam said, trying. "And people with two names are always someone in stories." "I have one name," Jon said. He let Ghost lick the blood from his fingers. "I said it under the heart tree. I said it when I put my hand on the black stone and made myself smaller than a crown and bigger than a boy. I'm the Watch's, and the Watch is mine. But if you could..." Sam fluttered hands like birds caught in a room. "Would you?" "I would not," Jon said before the wanting could run over him like a spring flood. "If I start saying if, I will find myself saying it to a sword's point." A shadow passed at the door, and the old wooden latch lifted itself as if by memory. Maester Aemon entered leaning on his staff, eyes cloudy and sharp at once. His chain lay on his chest like a history. "I heard a bird," Aemon said, and there was something like humor in the old man's ruin of a voice. "At my age, one listens for news less because it might be good and more because it might be true." He tipped his head. "Come, Jon. Walk with me to the rookery. My bones like an errand to justify them." They walked over horse-stiff planks and between stones that had learned the meaning of patience, and the wind took skin off faces as if it had paid for it. In the rookery's smell of guano and feathers and old straw, Aemon turned his face toward Jon and said, "The wall has 1,000 stories in it. It is built of them as much as ice." "So I am a story now," Jon said, half-edged. "You always were," Aemon said gently. "Even before you were born, Jon Snow. Story is how men have made sense of winters. You are more than story now, because your name has been shouted into a city where men make crowns of such things." Jon could not speak for a moment. He had not cried since a boy's disgrace. Here, where wind would turn tears to pain, he did not intend to begin. "If I were not sworn," Aemon raised a trembling hand. "Duty is not bars on a man's heart. Duty is the door one chooses to close so something else does not enter." He looked out at the white world. "When I was young, they told me I might be king. I refused a crown and wore black instead. I have known both kinds of cold." He smiled toward the sound of ravens bickering. "Do not think your vow is less because men know the name it keeps behind it now. The vow is the vow. This is solace and sorrow both." Jon nodded. He reached and stroked the feathers of a bird that might have been listening. "If my father, the man who raised me, His voice failed on the word father and came back thin. "If Lord Stark, you will see him," Aemon said. "Men who love each other find a way. If the realm does not let him come to you, you will find a way to go to him in the place where vows allow a father to be only a father long enough for a word, and a son to be only a son long enough to hear it." The word came quicker than Jon feared and slower than he hoped. A raven clattered at dawn with its beak on the window frame, angry at the wind. The message tied to its leg was sealed plain and smelled of cold wax. Jon broke it and read words that made every part of him hurt at once and heal in a way hurt sometimes does. "I am coming north under the faith's protection and 100 eyes. I will stand with you beneath the weirwood if they let me, and beneath the open sky if they do not. Ghost keeps you. Keep your oath. We will be only ourselves a little while, and all we must be after. Edat Stark." Jon read it again and held the paper as if papers had weight, and perhaps this one did. The northern road turned. It always did. It turned around hills that had names no map recorded and trees that had faces if one had lived with them long enough. Eddard Stark rode north under a cloak that did not stop the rain and a name the small folk whispered, and the gold cloaks pretended they did not hear because there were too many eyes on him. Howland Reed traveled at his side as if he had always existed beside him. A shadow that knew herbs and the old ways men had forgotten because they had learned laws. Yoren led a group of recruits some miles ahead on a different road, boys who smelled of onions and panic. A girl hidden in a boy's clothes in fury. "Daggers out of doors and in of scabbards," he told them, and Arya rolled her eyes and tucked her knife where he told her to because she was not yet proud enough to die of it. Behind Eddard, the city simmered. Sansa wrote letters at Cersei's behest with hands that shook until they did not. She sent words like birds to Winterfell. "Come to King's Landing, bring your banners to bend the knee." The letters flew. Some were caught and read. Some were caught and burned. Some reached their marks and drew men south the way stories do. At the Trident, Robb Stark closed one of those letters with clean, careful hands and looked at the pages as if they could lie to him without meaning to. "We go south," he said, and the great Jon slammed a fist on the table like a thunderclap of approval. Catelyn arrived at River Unworn as a coin that has been made to pay too many debts. She kissed her father's brow where fever had made his skull sharp as a knucklebone. She held her brother's arm. She watched her son put on command like a cloak and hoped it would fit and not drown him when it rained. "We go to free your sisters," she said, and she did not say that she would go later to ask a boy in black to forgive a woman's poor devotions when she had a house and a heart between her and shame. "Stark and Tully," Robb said, voice breaking on the syllables and then not. "And law." He had read Stannis's letter, too. "We tell the realm we ride for the king's law. We do not declare a crown the North can't afford to wear." The great Jon guffawed, as if he liked crowns for hats. Other men nodded. The North had always been better at vows than ornaments. They wrote to lords that mattered and some that did not, because sometimes the ones who do not prove under sky they do. Men came with axes and oaths. They moved when the geese did. Eddard and Howland reached the neck where reeds outnumbered stones and the world grew old and green around the edges. They slept in a hut that smelled of clean rot and herbs. Howland set charms that were rope and rush at once. "You should have let me slit Peter Baelish's soft throat when we were boys," Howland said conversationally as he sorted feathers. "It would have saved you this." "I will not change what we were to spare who we are," Eddard said. "If I start cutting at my life backward, I'll cut my own hands off. We move forward. We always have." "You move," Howland said. "The rest of us watch to make sure what follows doesn't trample you." He tied a charm with deft fingers. "I saw the river the day before we reached the Tower of Joy. It was red then, Ned. I remember thinking men only like to call that color wine because it makes them feel better about drinking it. Today I saw a brook and it was clear. That tells me nothing except that things change, and sometimes they do not change so loudly we notice. They made Winterfell before the worst of a rain that wanted to be snow but had forgotten how. The walls were the color of old memory. The gods would smelled like a wound that had healed and still ached when weather turned. Eddard went to the heart tree and looked up into a face carved by hands that had known him since he was small. He put his palm to the red sap that could not be called blood because men wanted to keep certain words for themselves, and he said aloud, "I am about to ask you to forgive me for saving a boy because a girl asked me to. If that offends you, you are not the gods I swore to." The face did not change. Perhaps that was mercy. He left at dawn for the wall with a company of men who wore no livery except the dust of the road, because travelers and prey dress alike if they are clever. He would take few. It was easier to lose a few in snow. It was easier to get a few through a gate guarded by men who honored a writ of sanctuary from the High Septon because they had once believed in stories and still did. He found Jon in the yard beneath the wall's blue-white hugeness, where snow grudged the work of being snow and the air made men's words look like smoke. Ghost stood with him in a breeze that lifted the direwolf's fur and made him look made of the same stuff as Storm. Jon turned, and there was Lyanna's stubborn mouth and Rhaegar's quiet gravity in his stillness. And Eddard learned how to carry both grief and joy in one rib cage without breaking it. They went to the old wooden solar where Lord Commander Mormont drank mornings like medicine and afternoons like remorse. Mormont left them there with the courtesy of men who can still recognize a father's face even when the law tells them to look away. Aemon did not intrude, and yet his presence hung in the air like something that had warmed just a little the stones of the last fire. Jon shut the door. He stood awkward as boys stand when they want to kneel and are too old for it. "Father," he said and swallowed. "My lord." "Father," Eddard said, "because a father is the man who shows up when it is hard, and because certain words should be used when they are true without arithmetic. If the law snaps at our heels, let it. It will tire." Jon's laugh broke. He shook his head. "You are much of what I am." "And much of what you are is not me," Eddard said. He put his hands on Jon's shoulders and found they fit as if made for this. "I loved you into my house. I would do it 1,000 times, though it broke me, though it cost me my honor every day. Your mother was my sister. Your father was a man I came south to kill and did not, because the world changed faster than my sword." He paused. "Some things a man says only once. She asked me to keep you safe. I'm better at keeping promises than at breaking hearts. So I broke fewer." Jon's eyes shone without shame. "She..." He could not say the name, so Eddard gave it to him. "Lyanna," Eddard said. And the name was Winter Roses, and a girl with a boy's temper and a woman's courage, and the way she had smiled when she had beaten Benjen at something small and called it large. She died with your name in her mouth. She died remembering you and me and a room with wind that smelled of the south and winter that would not wait. He took a breath that hurt his broken body and healed something else. The man you were born to, he was a prince. He loved his children. He broke some vows because he loved something more than the crown gave him permission to. Killed him in the end. Killed a lot of us. But he was not the song they sing to make him a thief. He married her. He gave you a name you cannot use here without changing more than you mean to." He smiled very slightly. "To me you are Jon. To me I am Jon," Jon said. He held Eddard's forearms as if to steady himself in a wind only he felt. "To others I am going to be a torch to start fires they mean to warm themselves by. Let the south burn itself tidy," Eddard said dryly, and Jon saw the stark humor that hid under snow. "Here we keep the cold from killing men in their sleep. That is work enough. Stannis will write letters and the Lannisters will write lies. The Tyrells will write songs. The realm will read what suits it. We are not ink. We are men." "I cannot come south with you," Jon said, and it was apology and relief and fear and pride all at once. "I did not ask it," Eddard said. "I came so you would never again have to call yourself by a lie when you pray or when you are alone. I came so that if ever the world cuts your name to use it as a weapon, you will know how to keep the part of it that belongs to you alone." He let his hands fall. "I will go to Winterfell and hold it for your brother while he steers men older than himself into sense. I will treat with Riverrun. I will tell Stannis he is right about the law and wrong about people. I will trade whatever I must to bring your sisters home." "You will not bow to the Lannisters," Jon said fiercely. "I will bend my back as far as it needs to keep a child out of a trap," Eddard said. "My honor is a blade." I know how to sheath it when there are better things to keep safe." Jon made a sound that might have been a laugh and might have been a sob, and Ghost rested his head against Eddard's thigh with a weight that was acceptance. Eddard stroked the direwolf's ears and thought of a white dog that had followed him as a boy and drooled on his boots and licked Lyanna's hands. He thought of Robert's laugh. He thought of blue roses. He thought of a promise and decided that a promise kept is a child who gets to tell his own stories. They stood a while with the silence between them that belongs to men who have set down something heavy and do not yet know what to carry instead. Outside, the wind hauled at the world. The wall hummed with old song, the kind that does not rhyme. In King's Landing the streets brewed rumor into wine and then into vinegar. Cersei sent for craftsmen to lay chains across the Blackwater Bay because men who fear the sea like to strangle it. She sent for Pycelle to suck and nod and for Slynt to find coin under cushions. She sent for Sansa to sit beside her and embroider while she talked in a voice that knit needles into threats. "Your father has made everything ugly," Cersei said. "Fathers do that. They track mud through clean houses because they think the floor belongs to them." She threaded gold through velvet and made it look like a wound that healed beautifully. "You will do as you are told and smile when told and keep your hands neat. Beauty is obedience men enjoy." Sansa smiled and kept her hands neat and learned which needles were for cloth and which were for throats. At Dragonstone, Melisandre sang to her fires. Stannis drilled men in the yard. Davos took ship after ship like a quiet tide. A message went north bearing Stannis' stiff gratitude to a boy who had chosen vows over a throne he could have used to warm his hands. It said in Stannis' hard letters, "Your restraint is noted." In the Riverlands, men died for fields they would not live to harvest. In the Westerlands, men melted coin to pour it into armor and called it patriotism and prudence both. In the Reach, girls with roses in their sigils and thorns in their smiles sat in gardens and counted the number of times the word trueborn could be spoken without sounding like prayer. On the Dothraki Sea, a girl not yet a queen sat before Teichar, ate dark eggs and told them a story about fire and loss because she did not yet know any other language to ask for what she wanted. A merchant from Pentos pressed Varys' letters into a saddlebag. "A boy in black," he said to her man with the painted beard. "There is always a boy in black." The girl's eyes were a color summers forget. She listened with the absence of fear that is not yet courage. Winterfell warmed its halls with the noise of men. Ravens went. Ravens came. Eddard moved through his house like a man measuring distance with his feet, and every corner held a ghost that did not trouble him. He met with bannermen and spoke in the slow northern way that made men feel they had thought of his plan themselves, and thus they did not betray it because betraying themselves would be stupid rather than wicked. He dreamed of the great September sometimes. In dream the light fell forever and never reached the floor, and Robert lay always on the bier and always laughing. He woke with a weight and found the weight was relief, and he was ashamed of it. The truth had not undone the world. It had only moved it, and they had not fallen off. He rode again to the wall with carts of grain and leather and boys who wanted to be men where men are forced to learn quickly or die. He sat with Mormont and Aemon and spoke of things other lords called superstition and he called weather. "When the wind turns this way, something follows," he said. And Mormont nodded and Aemon smiled and did not say the name of the thing because men sometimes keep the mouth of fear shut for the sake of keeping steady breath. He stood with Jon beneath the weirwood at the small godswood in Castle Black. The heart tree's face was rough where winter had carved it slow. They said nothing. There was little to add. They watched each other the way men watch the edge of a tide, knowing that it will come in and go out and the beach will look different and still be beach. On a day when the sky was a woolen shield and snow came polite as ash, a raven brought a letter with Stannis' hand. Jon read it and passed it to Eddard. It read, "The law is mine. The throne is mine. I will not burn your vows to warm my hands. The realm will have its reckoning." Eddard passed it back. "He will make a poor king and a good law," he said, and Jon tilted his head. "Is that better than the other way?" "It makes men sleep," Eddard said. "Sometimes sleep is the difference between a kingdom and carrion." In the south, Cersei stared at chains drawn across water and imagined they were bracelets made for other wrists. She smiled and wrote to her father and said, "In a hand that drew blood if you touched it. Come." Tywin came. His banners made the sky look like coin. He brought with him a program of war that had been old when the Mander flowed a different way. He smiled at his grandson and did not say what he thought of boys who made kingship look like a new toy, and Joffrey smiled because he liked being smiled at by a lion. War licked the corners of the map and then set to dining. Siege and sortie, writ and letter, treason and devotion. None of it changed certain things. The wall stood. The north watched. In the cold, the dead learned a way to walk that was not walking, and men told each other stories about it because they could not tell themselves the truth at once without shattering something they needed. On a night when the aurora stitched green thread through the dark and made the wall glitter as if it had eaten emeralds, Eddard Stark lay in a small room at Castle Black listening to the sleep of men who had chosen to protect people who would never know their names. He thought of Lyanna with blood on her thighs and petals in her hair, and the look she gave him when he gave her promises with impossible ends. He thought of Jon's face when he said father and meant two men at once. He thought of a realm that might yet learn to let truth bite without drawing back its hand. He slept. He dreamed the slow dream of winter, where things move under snow and look like nothing until they stand. When he woke, the world had not ended. It had moved. Bells would ring again in the great September for other kings, other queens, other sins. Chains would stretch again across water. Fires would ask men to give them names. The dead would come whether or not men had written letters to each other telling them how to live. But a promise had been kept. In this winter of brass and bone, where oaths froze on lips and swords learned the taste of men, a boy did not grow up believing himself a mistake. That alone does not save kingdoms. Sometimes it saves men. Sometimes Eddard thought that is where kingdoms begin. He rose. He went to find his son and share the morning the way men do who have long roads to walk and only one rule for walking them. Together, as far as vows allow. Then farther.